often, when we look at trends, we're just looking at products, flavors, dishes. But behind all of that are some social drivers going on behind the scenes, the bigger stories of the changing dynamics of society, the changing pressures in terms of resources, and the changing drivers in terms of technology. And we use the social anthropology, the science of human culture and society, to identify the meaning behind the brands. My favourite example is one of my favourite restaurants, which is Café Rouge. It's been around for a while, but when you walk into a Café Rouge, you walk into Paris. Everything about it, the dress of the staff, the chandeliers, the menu, the way they describe food such as, and drinks, let's say citron pressé, for example. It's about Paris. It's not just the food, it's the culture. And this is becoming more and more important in a world where we have infinite choice. There's thousands of ready meals, there's thousands of crisps and chocolate. Which are the ones that we want to buy? And in fact, what we've done is we've worked through all of the information that Charles has given us, and we've identified 25 cultural codes, and above that, 8 macro cultural platforms. And I'm going to take you through just a little selection of those, but you've got them all available through Charles to see exactly what's driving all of the ones that you have here. So, what we do, how do we do this? Essentially, we gather all of the information that he's provided with us, and we look at what's going on behind the scenes. And this is by looking at the images, the videos, the menus, some of those stories behind the brands. Why are people doing this? What do they care about? What's different? And we pull those together and create these overarching macro trends that you see here. And as I was mentioning, this is using the science of social anthropology and to some extent psychology behind that. So, the cultural codes, they give your brand meaning, the deeper meaning. Here we have the 25 here. Behind each of those words is an interesting story of what's going on in society to drive the behaviours and those food trends that we're seeing. It's the subliminal cultural trends, or what we sometimes call the system one thinking, that bit in our subconscious that makes us feel, want and desire the brands, rather than the post-rationalisation that we use with our system 2 frontal cortex. Underneath is the culture that's driven us to want to buy an iPhone instead of a Samsung, or to want a Mercedes instead of a BMW, when in fact they're identical in so many ways. So it's understanding why and this relevance behind the scenes, and that informs us of how a brand is going to meet our expectations and our needs by the way that it communicates with us. So Charles has shown you this map. This is the heart of the trends that we're looking at. And in fact, you can see here purpose is at the centre. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about purpose. And we're going to talk about some of the more interesting macro trends and the codes behind them in terms of culture. Others can be found online, and you can look at the PDF and understand those in more detail. But I've picked some of the slightly more radical and interesting ones to talk to you about today. And you've seen some of the manifestations of them just now from Charles. So, purpose. Well, we all need purpose, and in fact, when you look at a lot of the happiness measures, they measure 2 axes, not just the happiness one. They measure purpose as well as pleasure. And we need purpose in our lives to give us meaning. And in a world of infinite choice, brands with purpose relate to us more strongly, and purposes that we believe in. And we see wider societal changes that we're facing, and brands that align themselves with those ones we care about are the ones we want to buy more. Also, we like brands that are passionate and have a reason to exist. Now, it doesn't always have to be the hipster world of coolness that we're going to save the planet. It's just that you care about something, whatever that is, rather than you're just trying to flog something in the retro-capitalist style that our millennials have got slightly too used to. For example, the other day I was working in the world of chocolate, one of my favourite subjects, and we had a really good new chocolate product that we were researching, really good, different, standout. When we were talking to our target audience about the ones that they identified with, they picked 2 brands that they wanted to talk to me more about than any other. Both of those had a deeper story about why they existed. The others were great, they loved them, they tasted great, some good price points. But the ones they wanted to talk to me about, they had the story about why they existed. And that's what we're here to talk about, these codes that give us purpose. I'm going to pick on one of the ones that we've already seen a couple of examples of from Charles in terms of manifestations. And this macro trend is global cooling. This is all about the notion that we should do no harm. We've done quite a lot of harm to the planet, and let's just stop. And in fact, there's a number of ways in which we can do that in the world of food that we've seen coming through just now. And in fact, this hypersensitivity to the environment, welfare, local cultures, and all things natural and organic has now manifested itself in a world where we can cool down what we're doing and almost negate our impact. The first one is looking at nature's cool chemistry. And in fact, Charles has already mentioned a couple of these where we can use processes that do no harm. And in fact, ideas where we can use things that have no energy impact whatsoever. Old world food techniques such as pickling, fermenting, cold pressed, cold pressured, cold brewed, all of these are devoid of harmful chemicals and heat. But not only that, it's a win-win, because actually a number of these processes keep more of the nutrients inside them. So if we look at, say, cold pressed juices, they have more nutrients and more flavour. And a number of the brands, in fact, you can see here, Moju, celebrate that fact more than the fact that they're celebrating the planet, saving the planet at the same time. Grady's cold brew coffee, you can see here at the bottom left, is in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and they steep their coffee in different sorts of spices overnight for 20 hours, and things like chicory and such like. So again, you get many benefits to this global cooling approach. So if we can tap into some of these interesting stories as reasons for why our products are more powerful, or our offering is more powerful, then we can feel more aligned to our brands. Let's have a look at another one. This one I particularly like. So we just saw the rise of bacteria, probiotics, prebiotics coming through from Charles. Well, why is that? Well, there's a number of things driving this. One of them is the global cooling macro-cultural trend we've just seen. It also ties very well into our deeper understanding of what healthy gut bacteria can do for our immune system. And there's a lot of science coming through. We find a lot of the cultural drivers are driven by breakthroughs in science and understanding. So there's links to all sorts of autoimmune diseases in terms of preventing them through good bacteria. What we now see in society is a re-embrace of almost what we've seen in cleaning world, which is the world we also work in. The term dirt is good, we know from washing liquid, but now dirt is good in terms of food as well. And probiotics and prebiotics coming through strongly. Kefir we've just seen, kombucha also, where we have in kefir, for example, which is high in protein as well, another tick, up to 30 bacteria and yeast in one little pot. Also very good for lactose intolerance, as the lactose is reduced in the process. Kombucha, which is mushroom fermented tea. Sounds disgusting, I know, but I was drinking some just the other day and it was rather delicious. A little bit like a sort of ginger ale type beer taste, and fizzy, but in a natural way. And that helps digestion, cleans the liver, and apparently theanine even reduces stress, allegedly. But all of these things also help with our global cooling. And next, and finally for this little area, I've got some others, but I'll just talk to you about saved resources. So we've had this world of freeganism or food recycling around for a couple of years. But we can see here that, of course, it does help with our global cooling macro story. I don't know if anybody saw recently the film Dan Brown's Inferno with Tom Hanks in it. It's all on the premise of our exponential growth in the human population. It took 100,000 years to get to 1 billion, and then 100 years to get to 2, and so on, till the point where we're now nearly 8, and it's unsustainable. So how do we deal with that? Well, the Dan Brown story is not so palatable as perhaps this one. And what we have here is the idea of repurposing and actually keeping the waste food. Apparently, a third, or 1.3 billion tons of food is lost to waste. But 795 million, or a ninth of the population, don't have enough to eat. Well, Sam Joseph opened his cafe in 2014 to usurp those Nando's chicken, which is part of the Real Junk Food Project. And what we're seeing now is that humans, instead of thinking that waste food is disgusting, filthy, decaying, and a loss, is in fact regained and part of cleanliness and rebirth. And that attitude is the shift that we see in culture. And actually saving the resources is a way to feel good about oneself, almost giving us this feeling of semi-spiritual, almost heightening and increase in one's sense of self and satisfaction. If we move on to food religion, which is actually very much related to that thought. So now we see, instead of religion itself, that our attitude to food is almost a religious philosophy, be it one extreme or the other, that we can feel that the way that we eat can almost purify the soul, and that we have these sort of quasi-magical belief systems around how we eat. You can even see that by how people treat each other according to what you see them eating and what is socially acceptable. And so this is beyond just health to a kind of morality and immorality dimension. The first one is edifying denial. Not so helpful if you manufacture or sell food, because it's about not eating. But in fact, this can link to other things such as portion sizing and control, and small and intense, powerful flavors and foods. But denial or sacrifice is something that's always been linked to moral behavior. Obviously, many religions, Christian religion has Lent, Muslim religion has Ramadan. It's all about purifying the soul and the body and the mind as much as it is physically. But in fact, there's science emerging that says that to fast actually can almost reset your blood sugar levels, can bring you back from being on the edge of diabetic. So there's quasi-multiple benefits to the idea of edifying denial. But of course, you can feel like you've again heightened your sense of morality through doing so, as well as those health benefits that we can see from this denial. Now, if we move to mindful wellness, and we've all been in the world of superfoods now for more than a decade. When I looked it up, the first mention of superfoods seemed to be around 2004, although I'm sure that it might have popped up well before then. But the idea of superfoods has moved again to this more heightened spiritual or magical belief system around how we eat our food and what we eat. And the superness of the food combined again with the detoxifying power of the food is where it gets its greater power from. So if we look at the power foods that we see here, this brand that's in Australia, when you go on their website and they say, why superfoods? They start off with, well, why not superfoods? Why not get your calories from best nutrition? And this is actually in the sight of much evidence where if you try and get some kind of scientific backing to superfoods, most of the government websites and the science says no food is particularly super, and some of them, even like blueberries, you don't get much superness when you actually eat them. It's lost along the way. But these websites still talk about it. They sell seaweed, maca, super seeds. They talk about phytonutrients, minerals, antioxidants. That's obviously one of the biggies. And in fact, you even have superfoods sneaking their way into some of the most unsuper categories, like sweets, where we see the unreal unkinking what is really bad and making sweets out of things like beetroot and such like. So tricking their children into thinking they're having something naughty, when in fact it's actually good for them. Moving to something completely different as a cultural trend, here's a bit of shock value. Let's move away from being worthy for a moment and head towards something that's the opposite social phenomenon, where we are rather desensitized in our world to shock. We were discussing the other day how the certificates for films have completely changed, and what was unpalatable in an 18, 20 years ago is now probably a 12A. And this is happening in the world of eating as well. And we're seeing that a number of shock phenomena are being brought into the food arena to heighten the experience and the senses. And Charles was talking about that earlier in some of the manifestations of this. And I'm going to show you some of the most extreme versions where the psychological boundaries are being subverted in the world of food. First of all, we have inverted disgust. You've probably all seen Bush Tucker trials. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And we certainly have a number of restaurants who've been trying to sell all sorts of disgusting things for some years, suddenly now seeing it take off. And you've got here things like cod sperm as a delicacy, anyone? Beef brains, fish heads, tuna hearts, and some of the things that we didn't like talking about before, such as bones, are now a good thing to talk about, and their broth. But increasingly, parts of the animal are being considered acceptable when they've been disgusting in the past. And this is to do with this kind of heightened, rarefied social psychological sort of status through experiencing something that is almost akin to things that are off limits in terms of creating a new sensation and almost pushing through those barriers and feeling what it feels like to eat something that your body's trying to stop you from eating. We also see human flesh, not only meat flesh on sale, but the exposure of human flesh. You don't actually have to eat it. Cannibalism hasn't quite made it in yet, but we see here that there's a number of restaurants now that have opened. Amrita in Tokyo, Bunyadi in London, where there's quite a lot of partial or full nudity, eating off bodies in restaurants and such like. Again, it's about pushing those experiential boundaries, taking that journey to a greater level. When we work in places like China, quite often it's all about what can I take a picture of and share. This also happens here, but if you go to China, it's pretty much all about that. When you go into shopping malls, they have these great big exhibitionist displays specifically designed by the mall to get people to go there so they can have their picture taken in front of it. And again, this is another example of trying to prove that you've pushed the boundary, you've gone further. And so we see this as an example of that. Interestingly enough, conversely, when I was a girl, it would have all been about getting drunk, the drugs, etc., as the way of pushing the boundaries. But now we have about 25% of the UK population are teetotal, and 30% in London are teetotal. And it's just not seen as cool anymore, particularly as that's what our parents are up to. So we have to find other ways of being outrageous. back to doing things that we think, finally, are pushing the boundaries. So we're talking about disgust a moment ago. There's another reason why you might want to eat things that other people find disgusting, not just for that sort of psychosocial benefit, but also to prove that you are cavalier and fearless. In a world, perhaps, where we haven't got enough resources, there isn't enough protein now, there's 8 billion people to feed, you're prepared to be the cavalier. You're fearless and you're willing, and you have the strength and the determination to try things that are actually going to help save the planet. And so intrepid exploration and signalling your willingness to take a step into this brave new world is another way that you can gain social status. So edible bugs, grubs, etc. All of these I see up on the board over there, crickets, which is very popular. You can have all sorts of things like pancakes made with cricket flour, which is a way to get around your disgust. You don't really notice them. Then you can prove that you're up for the challenge. And so, moving back to how we make all of this fit together. How do we actually use these and work out which ones are relevant for our brands? Because there's almost just far too many trends. It's like innovation. You've always got too many ideas. It's working out which ones are going to drive your brand and give you growth and value. So they all fit together, the cultural trends, to explain the food and beverage trends below them. And from this, that helps you decide which ones are most relevant to your brands on offer. You've seen Charles show you this, which shows you how they all ladder up and fit together, and working out which of your cultural drivers you might want to use is the next step. Now, not all of these macro trends are as polarizing as you think. So some of them that might have felt a little bit obscure actually could fit. If you're a comforting brand that brings satisfaction through gluttonous comfort or sentimentality, you can be a religion just as much as those who are following the ethical path. And so you'll be able to see which of these cultural drivers you feel best align with your brand positioning, your brand pyramids or brand keys, brand love hearts, whatever they are. You can choose which of those are most closely aligned and fit to your brand. What we tend to recommend when we work with our different clients, at 1HQ we've found that best practice is to look at those macro cultural drivers, see which ones most closely align with your brand values, also your tone of voice, and behind that, of course, your reasons to believe, the actual attributes that you're able to deliver. Which of those best fit? You can then identify the macro trends and then the food trends underneath them. And from that, you can feed that into a workshop, and you can look at the new opportunities and the new food trends that naturally fit into your capabilities and also those brand values behind them. And from that, then create your own activation strategy to move forwards. So that's it from me and 1HQ. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand you back to Charles.